Top Kamala Harris advisor Ian Sams was interviewed by the Fox Propaganda Network earlier today, and he steamrolled the Fox host in question and pummeled Trump relentlessly ahead of tonight's debate, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. Ian Sams is a relatively obscure former White House advisor to President Biden, and he resigned to join Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris's campaign, and become one of her top surrogates and advisors. He is an excellent researcher and debater. He loves sparring with conservatives. And to the extent that he's been featured on Pondering Politics before, it's in his capacity as basically the chief debunker of House Republicans' desperate attempts to impeach President Biden. So he basically led the effort and was a major foil for top Republican in the House of Representatives, James Comer. And now he appeared on the Fox Propaganda Network to be interviewed by Steve Doocy, Peter Doocy's father, a conservative, a Trump supporter, part of Fox and Friends. And the interview did not go particularly well for Mr. Doocy, and even worse for the guy he wants to win this election, Donald Trump.
Is she nervous? She's ready. I mean, I think she's been looking forward to this debate. It's an opportunity for both she and former President Trump to explain to the country what it is they want to do as president. And there'll be a clear contrast on that stage. I think that Vice President Harris represents the future. She wants to turn the page on the past. She represents a new way forward for this country, where Donald Trump represents something old, something stale, something that people are ready to move on from. I think, he'll have to answer for some of his positions. Why all of a sudden is he for no taxes on tips when his administration tried to take tips away from tip workers and give it to their bosses? Why is he changing his position on an abortion ban in Florida 2 times within a 24-hour span? I mean, these are the kind of things that Donald Trump's going to have to answer for to explain to the country. And I think he's going to have to figure out for just a few minutes during this debate whether he can talk about anything other than himself. I think he wants to spend more time complaining about her crowd sizes compared to his than talking about.
So Ian Sams is doing so well that he is even visibly amusing Steve Doocy, again, who, is not the most MAGA Republican in the employ of the Fox Propaganda Network, but again, a conservative who grades Trump on a curve. But even Steve Doocy is like, all right, this guy's good. He's making some good points. So a couple of things. I love the fact that Ian Sams disarmed a talking point that we hear Republicans talk about, Donald Trump's plan to not tax tips in the service industry. And that was widely celebrated by working and middle-class Americans, understandably so. As a matter of fact, the vice president announced a similar plan that I would argue, and most economists have argued, is even more fiscally responsible and nuanced and detailed than Trump's. But he disarmed the Trump campaign of that particular talking point by saying, is he really credible on this issue, given his past performance as the president of the United States when he had economic and fiscal policies which ran contrary to the plights of service workers and middle class and lower class Americans, given that his priority was on the rich. Also, I love the fact that he also slipped in there the fact that Donald Trump flip-flopped on the crucial issue of abortion, one of the most important issues for Americans, multiple times in a 24-hour spread. And that's important because, as you might expect, later on, Steve Doocy will try to hit Ian Sams with this idea that the vice president has flip-flopped on issues. So he's sneaking in there the fact that Donald Trump does it even more egregiously, and not over a span of 5 years, but as a matter of fact, over a span of 24 hours for pure, naked political reasons. Great performance by Ian Sams. Another clip.
But she's going to hold him accountable when he lies. I mean, one thing we know about Donald Trump is he can't basically get through a sentence without saying something that's even a little bit hyperbolic, if not a flat out lie. And so, he's going to be held accountable for that in this debate. She's happy to do that as appropriate, but she wants to spend her time actually communicating to the American people her vision. For example, just last week, she rolled out a plan to help small businesses grow, expand the tax deduction for new small businesses from $5,000 to $50,000 because it takes $40,000 on average to start a small business in this country.
On that subject, I should say that plan was so well received that even fellow Fox News and Fox Business hosts like Stuart Varney publicly conceded that that's a damn good plan. And as a matter of fact, Varney in particular made a top Republican, the co-chair of the Republican National Committee, Michael Whatley, made him publicly concede that the vice president's proposal on that subject was really, really good. More Ian Sams.
I think there's a lot of Fox News viewers out there who don't necessarily hear a lot about her plans to help small business and to create opportunity in the economy. People like CEOs like Mark Cuban, former CEO of Pepsi, former CEO of Ford and Lyft, these American companies who are coming out to endorse her in this campaign, saying she's the most pro-business candidate in this race.
Okay.
And so I think these are the kind of things she wants to communicate to the American people about her vision for the country, as opposed to President Trump, who just wants to give tax cuts to billionaires and those at the very top.
Again, I just think it says something that Steve Doocy, for all his partisanship, is enough of he's enough of a professional to kind of tip the hat and take amusement when an adversarial guest does well in terms of relaying the talking points, debunking things in real time. So I got to give him props there. Again, really important that because Ian Sams is on Fox, which is, of course, is a very conservative audience relative to other audiences, Ian Sams is strategically emphasizing things that we would typically associate with Republicans or the conservative movement, particularly the vice president's big business bona fides or the endorsement that she's getting from C-suites across the country. Now, progressives would be hesitant about that, would be wary about that, and understandably so. But because he's not speaking in front of progressives, he's rightly framing the issues like, hey, Fox viewers, Fox News love their billionaires, right? Because again, the free market capitalist system, if you're a billionaire, means you're better than somebody. Well, Mark Cuban and a bunch of the top business people in the country are endorsing the vice president. So by the conservative standard, correlating big business and big business endorsements with success and intelligence, look at this. Look at the surprising number of big business executives that are actually endorsing the vice president, even though she's much more likely to tax the hell out of them than Donald Trump. It should say something about Donald Trump's unique disqualification to be president of the United States and his objectively terrible record as chief executive. Another clip.
Ian, you know she's got some problems, and one of the problems is how she's changed positions on stuff. I know you've been with her for a while. You were with her campaign back in 2019 when she was against fracking. She was for Medicare for all, against border wall funding. She called it un-American. How's she going to explain the flip-flopping?
Well, look, Vice President Harris has spent the last 3.5 years as the vice president of the United States. And what has she been able to do as the vice president of the United States? She's been able to work with President Biden toward consensus-driven solutions that can actually make change in people's lives. You bring up Medicare for all. She doesn't support Medicare for all. She's not running on Medicare for all.
Well,
she's running to expand. She's running to expand the progress that we've made in this administration on healthcare. For example, capping the cost of insulin for seniors for $35, capping seniors out-of-pocket prescription drug costs. Those are things that she cast the tie-breaking vote to get done in this administration. And so she's learned from her experience as the vice president that we don't need these big, dramatic upheaval shifts in our society when we can actually work together to make the same kind of big progress on.
So again, note the framing. In a vacuum, I would not be happy about this because this is more conservative than I would like. But consider who Ian Sams is talking to, both directly, Steve Doocy, conservative, but also more importantly, the audience, Fox viewers who might not otherwise hear an effective delivery of the vice president's agenda, because certainly Fox won't frame it in an honest way. And they're going to do everything in their power if they're confronted with a capable surrogate like Ian Sams. Number one, if they invite him in the first place. Number two, they're going to do everything kind of like what they do with Jessica Tarloff, try to outnumber that person and heckle that person. I'll give kudos here to Steve Doocy, again, conservative, Trump-supporting Republican. He's at least giving a fair interview, okay? But note the framing. Ian Sams is leaning more into a moderate conservative prism, which makes me uncomfortable, but is very effective for what he's doing with Fox viewers. He's saying, listen, you know, the vice president has these lofty ideals. She has these lofty ambitions. If she could snap her fingers and make Medicare for all, of course she would, but she's been governing not legislating, governing as vice president of the United States alongside President Biden. She recognizes that things that she wanted to accomplish 5 years ago are practically impossible given the current political dynamic. And so she's going to do everything in her power to make strides in that direction. So since she can't snap her fingers and make Medicare for all, she is going to do everything in her power with the current political reality to expand healthcare in this country, to use her power as she used her power as the vice president, casting a tie-breaking vote to cap insulin at $35 for seniors. This is also important because it disarms another Trump talking point. Donald Trump and Republicans on Fox News, and with the help of Fox News, I might add multiple times, as we've discussed in previous videos, has spread the lie that it was Donald Trump who was responsible for capping insulin, even though that's not true. Trump issued an executive order that for Medicare Part D recipients, so a specific part of Medicare recipients, not all, a specific part, they could opt into a voluntary program in which companies could cap insulin at $35. So the number of people covered was far fewer, and it was a voluntary program for all involved, including the companies as well. Whereas President Biden signed into law a requirement that Medicare recipients get insulin capped at $35. It's not voluntary, and it's not a matter of negotiations. He's telling Medicare they will cap insulin at $35. And that's how it's going to be, to say nothing of her casting the tie-breaking vote with the Inflation Reduction Act, which has also allowed Medicare or empowered Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. So basically, the vice president has used her power as vice president to help President Biden force Big Pharma to the table to negotiate prescription drug prices, which I might add is something that Donald Trump talked about and promised to do when he ran for president in 2016. So this is another example of the Biden-Harris administration fulfilling a promise made by the Trump-Pence administration. They succeeded where Trump-Pence failed. Excellent framing for what Ian Sams is trying to do. One more clip.
What we've been talking about is how the structure of this debate, Donald Trump's team threatened to pull him out of this debate unless he could have a muted microphone. I think that they are worried
Ian,
about
that's the deal that you guys, the Biden campaign, which is now the Kamala Harris campaign, agreed to that originally. That was your suggestion. You guys wrote it all out and put it out on social media, and then Trump goes, I'm for all that stuff. It was your idea initially.
Well, we have a different candidate now. Vice President Harris is a different candidate than President Biden, and Vice President Harris
You're sticking by the same date
about having a real dialogue in this debate to where the two candidates could engage. But President Trump's team wouldn't budge. They weren't willing to have President Trump be unmuzzled to talk about what he really wants to talk about in this debate. They wanted to keep him controlled in a 2-minute span so that he didn't veer off wildly off script. And so I think that what we've been talking about, you ask about sort of the...
So again, great performance by Ian Sams. Again, you just note the tacit tip of approval, tip of respect. Like, okay, as one professional to another, as one person on one side of the aisle to another person on the other side of the aisle, I tip my hat to you. That was an excellent performance, and indeed it was. Obviously, the microphones will be muted in tonight's upcoming debate. I suppose it's possible that in studio, Donald Trump could interrupt to such an extent it would be picked up on the vice president's microphone, but it seems unlikely. But yes, that was very clearly staged by the Trump administration to benefit him. Now, listen, when Joe Biden was the Democratic nominee, I made the argument that it was entirely possible that on paper that should have helped President Biden because it would have prevented Donald Trump from derailing him. Unfortunately, President Biden gave a disastrous performance anyway. Trump did too, but the media focuses less on it because they grade Trump on a curve and have higher expectations of President Biden. But listen, great performance by Ian Sams all the way, making the case and pre-framing issues and pre-bunking issues to a Fox viewership that is probably not just hostile to these notions in the first place, but very rarely hears them from a capable Harris surrogate. So great performance all the way around. And in the meantime, you let me know what you think in the comments.